Rich woman mocks a poor cleaner. What happens next changes her life forever. The chandelier glittered above the grand living room, casting soft light across the cream-colored walls and golden accents that adorned the sprawling mansion. Victoria Lancaster sat perched on an ornate chair, her emerald green dress shimmering as she sipped her tea. Her jewelry sparkled in the light, a clear display of her wealth and social status. To anyone observing from a distance, she was the epitome of grace and elegance. But to those who worked for her, Victoria was a storm wrapped in silk. "Elena!" Victoria's sharp voice echoed through the room, breaking the delicate silence. A young woman hurried in from the hallway, wearing a crisp blue cleaning uniform and clutching a dust cloth. Elena's heart raced as she approached her employer, bracing herself for what she knew would come next. "Yes, Mrs. Lancaster," she said, her voice soft but steady. Victoria held up a delicate porcelain cup, inspecting it with disdain. "Do you see this? Look closely." Elena stepped forward, her brow furrowing as she examined the cup. It looked pristine to her, but she knew better than to argue. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Lancaster. Is there something wrong with it?" Victoria let out a dramatic sigh, as if the mere question was a burden. "There's a smudge on the handle. Do you expect me to drink from a cup that looks like it's been handled by filthy hands?" Elena's cheeks flushed, but she kept her composure. "I'll clean it right away," she said, reaching for the cup. Victoria snatched it back, her expression icy. "That's not the point. The point is that you're supposed to ensure everything is perfect before it even reaches my hands. Is that too much to ask?" "No, ma'am," Elena replied, her voice calm even as her stomach churned. "It won't happen again." "It better not," Victoria said, setting the cup down with a clink. She waved her hand dismissively. "Now, go make yourself useful somewhere else." Elena nodded and quickly left the room, her heart pounding as she escaped Victoria's piercing gaze. She retreated to the kitchen, where the other house staff were busy with their tasks. One of them, an older woman named Maria, glanced up as Elena entered. "Let me guess," Maria said, her tone wry. "Another lecture from Queen Victoria?" Elena managed a small smile. "The usual," she said, reaching for a cloth and some cleaning supplies. This time, it was a smudge on a teacup. Maria shook her head. That woman wouldn't know kindness if it slapped her in the face. "Don't let her get to you." "I'm trying," Elena said quietly. "It's just hard sometimes." Maria placed a comforting hand on Elena's shoulder. "You've got more strength than she'll ever have. Remember that." Elena nodded, grateful for Maria's support. But as she returned to her work, the sting of Victoria's words lingered. No matter how hard she tried, it seemed nothing was ever good enough for the woman who lived in her gilded bubble. Upstairs, Victoria lounged on her chaise, scrolling through her phone with an air of boredom. She barely registered the cleaning staff moving about the house, their presence little more than background noise to her. To Victoria, they were invisible, just another part of the machinery that kept her life running smoothly. She glanced up briefly as Elena passed by, her lips curling into a faint smirk. "Imagine having to clean for a living," she muttered to herself, shaking her head. "How pitiful!" Victoria didn't think twice about her words or the impact they might have. To her, wealth and status were the ultimate measures of success. She had spent her entire life surrounded by luxury, and she couldn't fathom how anyone could live without it. As she returned her attention to her phone, a notification popped up, an invitation to an exclusive charity gala being held at the city's most prestigious hotel. Victoria's mood brightened instantly. The gala would be the perfect opportunity to showcase her status, mingle with the elite, and remind everyone of her place at the top. But little did Victoria know, the events set in motion that day would soon challenge everything she thought she knew about success, worth, and what it truly meant to live a meaningful life. Elena busied herself in the laundry room, folding a fresh stack of towels with meticulous care. Her hands moved quickly, though her thoughts were far from the linens she worked on. She thought of her daughter, Rosa, waiting for her at home. Rosa was only 7 but wise beyond her years, always quick to notice when Elena returned from work tired or upset. Elena had tried to shield her daughter from the worst of it, but Rosa's bright eyes always seemed to ask the question Elena dreaded: Why do you let them treat you like that, Mama? Elena sighed as she placed the towels into a basket. It wasn't just for Rose's sake that she endured Victoria's insults. It was because she had no choice. The job paid well enough to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads, and for a single mother with no family to lean on, that was reason enough to stay. As Elena carried the basket back into the main hall, she passed the open door of the study, where Victoria sat typing on her laptop. The click-clack of keys echoed in the quiet room, but as Elena passed, Victoria's voice cut through the air. "Elena," she snapped, her tone as sharp as ever. Elena froze, turning back reluctantly. "Yes, Mrs. Lancaster?" Victoria gestured toward a pile of papers on her desk, not bothering to look up. "This is a disaster. My accountant sent me these files, and they're completely out of order. Do you think you could manage to organize them, or is that too much for you?" Elena bit her tongue, suppressing the urge to respond with the frustration she felt bubbling under her calm exterior. "Of course, ma'am," she said evenly, stepping into the room. Victoria leaned back in her chair, watching as Elena sorted the papers with practiced efficiency. For a moment, she seemed to study the younger woman, a faint sneer tugging at the corners of her mouth. "You know," Victoria began, her voice dripping with condescension, "I always wonder about people like you. Don't you ever want more? To do something with your life?" Elena paused, the question catching her off guard. She looked up at Victoria, meeting her gaze for the first time in what felt like weeks. "I do want more," she said softly. "But that doesn't mean I'm ashamed of the work I do." Victoria raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Well, if you're happy cleaning up after other people, I suppose that's your choice." Elena's grip on the papers tightened, but she forced herself to remain calm. "It's not about being happy, ma'am. It's about doing what's necessary. And sometimes that's enough." Victoria smirked, waving her hand dismissively. "If you say so. Just don't forget to dust the bookshelves before you leave." Elena nodded curtly, finishing her task before leaving the study. Her heart ached as she walked back to the laundry room, but her resolve remained unbroken. She wasn't going to let Victoria's words define her. That evening, Victoria prepared for the charity gala with her usual flair, selecting a gown that shimmered with every step she took. Her jewelry sparkled under the lights as she admired herself in the mirror, adjusting her hair with a satisfied smile. The gala was one of her favorite events of the year, a chance to flaunt her wealth and rub elbows with the city's elite. As she descended the grand staircase, Elena stood at the base, carefully holding Victoria's coat. She had been asked to accompany Victoria to the event, not as a guest but as a staff member tasked with ensuring everything went smoothly. "Try not to embarrass yourself tonight," Victoria said as she took the coat. "I don't need people asking why I brought the help along." Elena's cheeks flushed, but she said nothing. She followed Victoria out to the waiting car, steeling herself for the long evening ahead. The gala was as extravagant as ever, with crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling and tables adorned with gold-trimmed centerpieces. The room buzzed with conversation as guests mingled, sipping champagne and exchanging pleasantries. Victoria was in her element, gliding through the crowd with a practiced smile, her laughter ringing out like a bell. Elena stood near the back of the room, keeping to herself as she observed the scene. She had no desire to interact with the guests, many of whom barely acknowledged her presence. Still, she couldn't help but feel a pang of longing as she watched them laugh and talk so effortlessly. It was a world she had only ever glimpsed from the outside, one that felt impossibly out of reach. As the evening wore on, Victoria's voice grew louder, her confidence bolstered by the attention she received. She reveled in the compliments, basking in the glow of her own self-importance. But her hubris soon got the better of her. While chatting with a group of influential donors, Victoria stepped backward, not noticing the small puddle of spilled champagne on the marble floor. Her heel slipped, and before she could catch herself, she fell to the ground with a loud, unceremonious thud. The room fell silent as gasps rippled through the crowd. Victoria lay sprawled on the floor, her gown crumpled and her hair askew. For a moment, she looked utterly humiliated, her poised facade shattered. Elena, who had been watching from across the room, acted without hesitation. She hurried over to Victoria, kneeling beside her and offering a hand. "Are you all right, Mrs. Lancaster?" Elena asked gently. Victoria looked up at her, her face a mix of embarrassment and disbelief. She hesitated for a moment before taking Elena's hand, allowing herself to be helped to her feet. The whispers around the room were barely concealed, and Victoria's cheeks burned as she smoothed her dress. "I'm fine," she said sharply, brushing herself off. "Let's just move on." Elena nodded, stepping back to give Victoria space. But as she returned to her spot near the wall, she noticed something different in Victoria's expression. It wasn't gratitude, not quite. But there was a flicker of something that hadn't been there before, something that looked almost like vulnerability. The ride home was quiet, with Victoria staring out the window, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Elena sat beside the driver, unsure of what to say. She didn't expect an apology or even a thank you, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. When they arrived at the mansion, Victoria paused before getting out of the car. She glanced at Elena, her expression unreadable. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Elena blinked, caught off guard. "Of course, ma'am." Victoria nodded curtly and stepped out of the car, disappearing into the house without another word. Elena watched her go, a mixture of confusion and hope swelling in her chest. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was more to Victoria than she had thought. The next morning, Elena arrived at the mansion early as usual. The house was quiet, with the only sounds being the faint ticking of a grandfather clock and the occasional creak of the floorboards as she moved through the halls. She kept her focus on her work, but the memory of the previous night lingered in her mind. Victoria's quiet thank you had been so out of character that it left Elena wondering if it was a fleeting moment of vulnerability or the start of something more significant. Elena was dusting the bookshelves in the study when Victoria entered the room. She was dressed in a soft green robe, her hair still pinned from the night before. Her usual sharpness seemed dulled, replaced by an air of thoughtfulness that Elena had never seen before. "Elena," Victoria said, her voice lacking its usual edge. Elena straightened up, clutching her dust cloth. "Yes, Mrs. Lancaster?" Victoria hesitated for a moment, as if she were searching for the right words. "About last night? I may have overreacted, and I suppose I should thank you for stepping in." Elena blinked, unsure how to respond. This was the first time Victoria had offered anything resembling an apology. "I was just doing my job, ma'am," she said carefully. Victoria waved a hand dismissively, though her expression softened. "Yes, well, you handled it well. Better than most people would have." There was an awkward pause before Victoria turned her attention to the desk. "That'll be all," she said, her tone returning to its usual briskness. Elena nodded and quietly left the room, her heart racing. It wasn't much, but it was something. A crack in the armor, perhaps. For the first time, she felt a sliver of hope that Victoria might not be as unreachable as she seemed. Victoria, however, was grappling with emotions she couldn't quite name. The events of the gala had shaken her in a way she hadn't expected. Falling in front of all those people, her peers, her social circle, had been humiliating enough. But the way Elena had rushed to her aid, without hesitation or judgment, lingered in her mind. Why had she done it? Victoria had spent years treating her and the rest of the staff as little more than fixtures in her home, yet Elena had shown her kindness when she needed it most. As the day went on, Victoria found herself noticing things she had never paid attention to before. She saw Elena carrying a heavy stack of linens up the stairs and realized how grueling her job must be. She overheard Maria, the older housekeeper, talking about her grandson's medical bills and felt a pang of guilt for how little she had considered her employees' personal lives. For the first time, Victoria began to see the people around her not as servants, but as individuals with stories, struggles, and dreams. That evening, Victoria sat in her bedroom, staring at the journal she kept tucked away in her nightstand. She rarely wrote in it. There was little she cared to reflect on. But tonight, she opened it and began to write, her pen moving hesitantly across the page. Why did Elena help me? Why did it feel so human? Have I been wrong about people like her? About myself? The questions swirled in her mind long after she closed the journal, keeping her awake as the house settled into silence. The next few days passed quietly, but the dynamic between Victoria and Elena began to shift in subtle ways. Victoria started to ask questions, small, innocuous ones that felt almost casual. How long have you been working here? Do you have family nearby? What do you do on your days off? At first, Elena was cautious, unsure of Victoria's intentions. But as the questions continued, she began to sense a genuine curiosity behind them. Victoria wasn't prying or mocking, she was listening. And that, more than anything, caught Elena off guard. One afternoon, as Elena was cleaning the windows in the dining room, Victoria entered with a cup of tea in hand. She watched Elena work for a moment before speaking. "Do you ever think about what you'd do if you didn't have to work here?" Victoria asked, her tone softer than usual. Elena paused, the question hanging in the air. "I think about it sometimes," she admitted. "I'd spend more time with my daughter. Maybe go back to school. I used to dream about starting my own business, but that feels far away now." Victoria's brow furrowed slightly. "What kind of business?" "A cleaning service," Elena said, a hint of pride in her voice. "One that treats its employees fairly, with good pay and benefits. I've seen how hard this work is, and I'd want to make it better for others." Victoria sipped her tea thoughtfully. "That's admirable," she said after a moment. "Most people wouldn't bother thinking about others like that." Elena smiled faintly. "I think it's important to take care of people, no matter where they come from or what they do." Victoria didn't respond immediately, but her expression softened. For the first time, she found herself genuinely impressed by Elena, not just as an employee, but as a person. That evening, Victoria found herself scrolling through her bank accounts and investment portfolios, her wealth laid out in stark numbers on the screen. She had always prided herself on her financial acumen, her ability to grow her fortune through shrewd decisions and strategic alliances. But for all her money, she couldn't remember the last time she had felt truly fulfilled. She thought about Elena's words, about the cleaning service she wanted to start. It was such a simple dream, yet it carried a depth of purpose that Victoria couldn't ignore. For the first time in years, Victoria felt a flicker of inspiration, an idea forming at the edges of her mind. The next morning, Victoria called her accountant and requested a meeting. She spent hours going over her finances, looking for ways to reallocate funds and create a new project. By the end of the day, she had a plan, one that both excited and terrified her. She approached Elena later that week, finding her in the kitchen. "Elena, I'd like to talk to you," Victoria said, her tone unusually formal. Elena turned, surprised. "Of course, ma'am. What about?" Victoria took a deep breath. "Your business idea. I want to help you make it a reality." Elena stared at her, stunned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Victoria said, her voice steady, "I want to invest in your cleaning service. I have the resources, and you have the vision. Together, I think we can create something remarkable." Elena's eyes widened, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Victoria said with a small smile. "Let me do something worthwhile for once." For the first time since she had started working for Victoria, Elena saw something in her employer's eyes that looked like hope. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, their lives were about to change in ways neither of them had ever imagined. Elena could barely process what Victoria had said. Her business idea was something she had only spoken about in passing, a distant dream she thought would never come true. And now, standing in Victoria's kitchen, she was hearing the one thing she never expected, an offer to make it real. Elena began, her voice shaky. "Why would you do this for me?" Victoria hesitated, her carefully composed demeanor softening. For once, her words seemed genuine. "Because I've realized something," she said slowly. "I've spent my life chasing things that don't matter. Money, status, appearances, it's all meaningless if I can't use it to make a difference. You've shown me that. Your strength, your dignity, it's made me see how selfish I've been." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away, unwilling to show vulnerability. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," Victoria said, her tone resolute. "Just promise me you'll take this opportunity and make something extraordinary out of it." Elena nodded, her chest tight with emotion. "I will. I promise. Over the next few weeks, the unlikely partnership between Victoria and Elena began to take shape. Victoria allocated a portion of her vast fortune to fund the startup costs, while Elena threw herself into the planning with a determination that left even Victoria impressed. They spent hours together in the study, going over budgets, business plans, and hiring strategies. At first, the process was awkward. Elena was still adjusting to working alongside the woman who had spent years belittling her, while Victoria struggled to adapt to a role that required collaboration rather than command. But slowly, they began to find common ground. Victoria's sharp business acumen complemented Elena's first-hand knowledge of the cleaning industry, and together, they began to create something that felt revolutionary. "You know," Victoria said one evening as they worked late into the night, "I've never actually built something like this before. Most of my ventures were investments I handed off to other people." Elena looked up from the notes she was scribbling. "Then why do this now?" Victoria paused, her expression thoughtful. "Because it feels meaningful. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm doing something that matters." Elena smiled softly. "It does matter. More than you know." The business, which Elena named Fresh Start Cleaning Services, launched 6 months later. It wasn't just a cleaning service, it was a company built on respect and fairness. Employees were offered competitive wages, health benefits, and flexible schedules, ensuring they could support their families without sacrificing their well-being. Training programs were implemented to help staff grow professionally, and a portion of the profits was reinvested into the communities they served. Victoria attended the grand opening, standing beside Elena as she addressed the small crowd of supporters and new employees. Elena's voice was steady as she spoke, her confidence shining through. "This company is more than just a business," Elena said. "It's a chance to show the world that every job, no matter how humble, deserves dignity and respect. I've spent years doing this work, and I know how hard it can be. That's why I'm committed to creating a better future, not just for me but for all of us." The crowd erupted into applause, and for the first time in her life, Elena felt like she was truly seen. Victoria, standing beside her, clapped the loudest, a genuine smile on her face. She hadn't expected to feel so proud, not just of the business, but of herself for helping to make it possible. As Fresh Start Cleaning Services grew, so did the bond between Victoria and Elena. What had started as a professional partnership blossomed into an unlikely friendship. They began to spend time together outside of work, sharing meals and stories about their lives. Elena told Victoria about her daughter, Rosa, and the sacrifices she had made to provide for her. Victoria, in turn, opened up about her own struggles, the loneliness of her privileged but empty life, and the regret she felt for the way she had treated others. One afternoon, Victoria visited Elena's modest apartment for the first time. It was small but immaculately clean, with bright curtains and framed drawings that Rosa had made hanging on the walls. Rosa herself greeted Victoria shyly, her big brown eyes filled with curiosity. "You're the fancy lady my mama works for?" Rosa asked, her voice innocent but direct. Victoria chuckled, taken aback by the child's boldness. "I suppose I am. But your mama doesn't work for me anymore. We're partners now." Rosa's eyes widened in surprise. "Partners? Like equals?" Victoria nodded, her smile softening. "Exactly like equals." Rosa grinned, clearly impressed. "That's cool. My mama's the best, you know." Victoria glanced at Elena, who was watching the exchange with a mixture of pride and amusement. "Yes, she is," Victoria said sincerely. "She's the very best." Over time, Victoria's involvement with Fresh Start began to transform her in ways she hadn't anticipated. She started spending less time at high society events and more time visiting the company's offices and meeting with employees. She learned their names, their stories, and their struggles, and for the first time in her life, she felt a genuine connection to the people around her. Her change didn't go unnoticed. Many of her old friends began to distance themselves, unable to understand why she would waste her time on something as trivial as a cleaning service. But Victoria didn't care. She had spent her entire life chasing their approval, and now she realized how hollow it had been. For the first time, she was living for something greater than herself. One day, Victoria and Elena were invited to speak at a community event about their journey and the success of Fresh Start. The audience was a mix of local business owners, workers, and families, all eager to hear their story. Elena spoke first, sharing her experiences as a cleaner and the challenges she had faced. She talked about the importance of dignity in work and how Fresh Start had changed her life. The audience listened intently, their expressions reflecting admiration and respect. When it was Victoria's turn to speak, she hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to begin. But as she looked out at the crowd, she saw faces filled with hope and possibility, and the words came naturally. "I used to believe that wealth was the measure of a person's worth," Victoria said. "I thought that money and status made me better than those around me. But I was wrong." Meeting Elena and seeing her strength, her resilience, her humanity changed everything for me. She showed me that true worth comes from the way we treat others and the impact we have on their lives. Victoria paused, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Fresh Start isn't just a business. It's a testament to what can happen when we put aside our differences and work together. And I am so grateful to be a part of it. The crowd erupted into applause, and for the first time, Victoria felt something she had never experienced before, a deep, genuine sense of belonging. As the years went on, Fresh Start Cleaning Services became a symbol of hope and empowerment. It expanded into new cities, providing opportunities for hundreds of workers and inspiring other businesses to adopt similar models. Elena, now a successful entrepreneur, continued to lead with compassion and determination, while Victoria found fulfillment in her role as a mentor and advocate. Their friendship, forged in the most unlikely of circumstances, became a cornerstone of their lives. Together, they proved that even the most entrenched divides could be bridged with empathy, understanding, and a willingness to change. And in the end, it wasn't just Elena's life that had been transformed, it was Victoria's as well. Fresh Start Cleaning Services thrived beyond anyone's expectations, becoming a model for businesses rooted in dignity and respect. As the company expanded into neighboring cities, it attracted attention not just from clients but also from media outlets, who were curious about its origins. Elena and Victoria were often invited to speak about their journey, sharing their contrasting paths and the lessons they had learned along the way. Elena, now a confident business owner, stood tall at these events, speaking with eloquence and passion. She recounted her struggles as a single mother and how years of being overlooked and dismissed had shaped her determination to create a better future, not just for herself, but for others like her. "I didn't grow up with much," she said at one event, her voice steady. "But I grew up believing in the value of hard work and the importance of treating people with kindness. When I dreamed of starting this company, I wanted it to be more than just a place where people earned a paycheck. I wanted it to be a place where they felt valued." Victoria would often follow Elena's speeches, offering her own perspective. Her transformation from a detached, entitled socialite to a compassionate advocate was just as compelling. She spoke candidly about her past, admitting to the mistakes she had made and the arrogance that had blinded her to the struggles of others. "Meeting Elena changed my life," Victoria said during one event, her tone sincere. "She showed me that strength doesn't come from wealth or power. It comes from resilience, compassion, and the courage to keep going even when the world seems stacked against you." Helping her build this company has been the most meaningful thing I've ever done. The audience always responded with thunderous applause, moved by the unlikely partnership between the two women and the impact of their work. Fresh Start became a symbol of hope, proof that change was possible even in the most unexpected circumstances. One day, as Elena sat in her modest but well-decorated office, a knock at the door interrupted her. "Come in," she called, looking up from the stack of paperwork in front of her. Rosa, now 10 years old, peeked her head in, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Mama, there's someone here to see you." Elena smiled and stood, curious about the visitor. When she stepped into the lobby, she was surprised to see a man in a crisp suit holding a briefcase. He introduced himself as a representative from a prominent business magazine. "We're doing a feature on businesses that are changing the world," the man explained. "And Fresh Start Cleaning Services is at the top of our list. Would you be willing to do an interview?" Elena blinked, momentarily taken aback. An interview? With me? The man smiled warmly. Yes, with you. Your story is inspiring, and we think our readers would benefit from hearing it. Elena glanced at Rosa, who was grinning from ear to ear. What do you think, Rosa? Should I do it? Yes. Rosa said enthusiastically. Everyone needs to know how amazing you are. Elena laughed, her heart swelling with pride. All right, she said to the man. Let's do it. The magazine feature was a turning point for Fresh Start. The story, accompanied by photos of Elena and Victoria working side by side, went viral, drawing attention from across the country. Messages poured in from people who were inspired by their journey, single mothers looking for hope, business owners seeking advice, and workers who wanted to join a company that valued them. One of the messages came from an unexpected source, a woman named Lydia, who had once been one of Victoria's closest friends. She wrote about how she had dismissed Victoria's transformation as a phase, but after reading the article, she realized how wrong she had been. I want to understand, Lydia wrote. Can we meet? Victoria was hesitant at first. Lydia had been part of her old social circle, a group of women who had once defined her world but who now felt like strangers. Still, something about the message struck a chord. She decided to meet Lydia for lunch at a quiet cafe downtown. When they sat across from each other, there was an awkward silence at first. Lydia was the first to speak. You've changed, she said, her tone a mix of admiration and regret. I hardly recognize you. Victoria smiled faintly. That's the point, isn't it? I couldn't stay the person I was. I used to think you were throwing everything away, Lydia admitted. But now I see that you've found something real. I envy that. Victoria tilted her head, studying her old friend. You don't have to envy it. Change is possible for anyone. But it takes work, and it starts with looking beyond yourself. Lydia nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. Maybe it's time I tried. Meanwhile, Fresh Start continued to grow, expanding its services to include mentorship programs for employees who wanted to pursue their own dreams. Elena was particularly passionate about this initiative, seeing it as a way to pay forward the support she had received. One of the first participants was a young man named Carlos, who had joined Fresh Start as a cleaner but dreamed of becoming a graphic designer. Elena worked with him to create a schedule that allowed him to take night classes, while Victoria connected him with clients who needed design work. A year later, Carlos presented Elena and Victoria with a surprise: a new logo for Fresh Start, one that symbolized the company's mission of empowerment and community. The logo featured two hands clasped together, forming the shape of a rising sun. This is what Fresh Start means to me, Carlos said as he unveiled the design. A new beginning. A chance to rise. Elena and Victoria were deeply moved, and the logo was adopted immediately. It became a proud symbol of everything they had built together. As time went on, both women continued to grow in ways they hadn't anticipated. Elena, once shy and reserved, became a confident leader and a sought-after speaker at business conferences. Victoria, who had once seen her wealth as a shield, used it as a tool for change, funding scholarships, community projects, and advocacy campaigns. Their bond deepened, evolving into a friendship built on mutual respect and admiration. They celebrated each other's victories, supported each other through challenges, and worked side by side to ensure that Fresh Start's mission remained true. One evening, as they sat together in Elena's office after a long day, Victoria looked at her friend and smiled. You've changed my life, you know? Elena laughed softly. Funny. I was about to say the same thing about you. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of their journey settling between them. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Together, they had created something that went beyond business. It was a movement, a testament to the power of empathy and the possibility of transformation. As they locked up for the night and stepped out into the cool evening air, Elena glanced at the Fresh Start sign above the door, its new logo glowing softly in the dark. We've come a long way, she said. Victoria nodded, her expression serene. And we're just getting started. Months passed, and Fresh Start cleaning services became more than just a business. It was a movement that inspired communities across the country. Elena and Victoria's story continued to attract attention, But neither of them let the spotlight distract them from the company's mission. The focus always remained on the employees and the communities they served. One particularly busy morning, Elena was at the company's newest branch in a neighboring city. The office was buzzing with activity as newly hired staff attended orientation, while longtime employees helped train them. Elena moved through the space, checking in with everyone and offering words of encouragement. As she spoke to one of the new hires, a young single mother named Anna, Elena saw a reflection of herself from years ago. Anna's nervous energy reminded Elena of the days when she'd started her cleaning job at Victoria's mansion, uncertain of what the future held. "You're going to do great here," Elena said, her voice warm. "We take care of each other at Fresh Start. If you ever need anything, my door is always open." Anna's eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you. This job already feels different, like people actually care." Elena smiled. "That's because we do." Meanwhile, back at the main office, Victoria was meeting with a group of potential investors. Though Fresh Start had never been short on funding thanks to Victoria's initial contributions, they were now considering partnerships to scale their operations nationwide. The investors were a mix of seasoned entrepreneurs and philanthropic organizations. Victoria, who had once been more concerned with appearances than substance, now found herself speaking passionately about Fresh Start's mission. "This isn't just about profits," she said firmly. "It's about people. We've proven that you can run a successful business while treating employees with dignity and respect. That's what we're offering. A chance to be part of something meaningful." The investors nodded, clearly impressed by her conviction. One of them, a man named Jonathan, leaned forward. "You've created something remarkable here, Mrs. Lancaster. I'd be honored to help you take it to the next level." Victoria exchanged a glance with Claire, who had been managing the company's financial growth. Claire gave her a subtle nod, and Victoria smiled. "Then let's make it happen." Later that evening, Victoria and Elena met at Elena's home to celebrate the company's latest milestone. Rosa had insisted on baking a cake for the occasion, and the smell of chocolate filled the small apartment as the three of them gathered around the table. "I still can't believe how far we've come," Elena said, slicing the cake. "Some days it feels like a dream." "It's no dream," Victoria said, her tone resolute. "You made this happen. We made this happen. And there's so much more we can do." Rosa grinned as she took a bite of cake. "Mama says you're the best partner ever, Mrs. Lancaster." Victoria laughed, touched by the child's enthusiasm. "Well, your mama is the best partner anyone could ask for." The moment was lighthearted, but beneath it lay a deep bond that had grown between them. Victoria had become like family to Elena and Rosa, and the feeling was mutual. The next few months brought new challenges and opportunities. Fresh Start's rapid growth meant hiring more staff, training new managers, and ensuring that their core values weren't lost in the expansion. Elena threw herself into the work, traveling frequently to oversee operations and meet with employees. One day, during a visit to a branch in Chicago, Elena was approached by a middle-aged man named Jorge. He had been with the company for just over a year and had recently been promoted to a supervisory role. "I wanted to thank you," Jorge said, his voice steady but emotional. "Before Fresh Start, I felt invisible, like no one cared about what I had to offer. But here, I found a place where I'm valued. My kids are proud of me, and for the first time, I feel proud of myself." Elena's eyes welled with tears as she listened. "Jorge, you've earned every bit of that pride. We're lucky to have you." The interaction stayed with Elena as she returned to her hotel that evening. It reminded her why she had fought so hard to build Fresh Start, not just for herself, but for people like Jorge who deserved a chance to thrive. While Elena focused on the day-to-day operations, Victoria began to explore new ways to use her influence. She started attending conferences on workplace equity, speaking about the importance of fair labor practices and the transformative power of empathy in leadership. At one such conference, Victoria was approached by a young woman named Priya, who worked as an HR manager for a large corporation. Priya had been following Fresh Start's story and wanted to learn how to implement similar principles in her own workplace. "It's not just about policies," Victoria told her. "It's about culture. You have to create an environment where people feel seen, heard, and valued." That's when real change happens. Priya nodded, taking notes as Victoria spoke. Thank you. This is exactly what I needed to hear. Victoria smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known was possible before meeting Elena. Helping others create positive change had become her new purpose, and it was one she embraced wholeheartedly. One evening, Elena and Victoria sat together in a quiet cafe, reflecting on their journey. The conversation turned to the future, and Elena couldn't help but voice her concerns. Do you ever worry that we're growing too fast? She asked. I don't want to lose what makes Fresh Start special. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. It's something I think about all the time. But I believe as long as we stay true to our values and surround ourselves with people who share our vision, we'll be fine. Elena smiled, reassured by Victoria's confidence. I guess we've come too far to turn back now. Exactly, Victoria said. And just think about all the lives we've touched, and all the ones we have yet to reach. By the end of the year, Fresh Start had expanded to 10 cities, with plans to open branches in 5 more. The company's success drew widespread acclaim, and Elena and Victoria were honored with several awards recognizing their contributions to workplace equity and community development. At the awards ceremony, Elena stood on stage with Victoria, addressing the crowd. This isn't just our story, she said. It's the story of every person who believed in us, who gave us a chance, and who worked tirelessly to build something better. This is what happens when we lift each other up. The audience rose to their feet, applauding as Elena and Victoria embraced. It was a moment of triumph, but more importantly, it was a testament to the power of collaboration and compassion. As Fresh Start continued to grow, so did the friendship between Elena and Victoria. They had started as adversaries, 2 women from vastly different worlds, but their shared journey had transformed them both. Victoria had found purpose and humility, while Elena had discovered strength and confidence she hadn't known she possessed. Together, they proved that even the most entrenched divides could be bridged with empathy, understanding, and a willingness to change. And in the end, their partnership wasn't just about building a business, it was about building a better world. Fresh Start Cleaning Services had become a household name, not just in the cities where it operated, but across the nation. Media outlets continued to tell the story of the unlikely duo, Elena, the former cleaner with big dreams, and Victoria, the wealthy woman who learned the value of humility. Together, they had built something extraordinary. But as the company expanded, new challenges arose, ones that tested their vision and the strength of their bond. One such challenge came when a corporate competitor began undercutting Fresh Start's contracts. This rival company offered cleaning services at lower rates, but at the expense of their employees, who were overworked and underpaid. Fresh Start's clients, particularly in areas where budgets were tight, began to consider switching providers. At a meeting in their main office, the leadership team discussed the issue at length. Elena sat at the head of the table, her brow furrowed as she listened to their concerns. It's a problem, said Claire, who had been instrumental in managing the company's growth. We can't compete on price without cutting wages or benefits, and that's not who we are. Elena nodded. We've built this company on the idea that treating people with dignity isn't negotiable. We can't compromise that, no matter what. Victoria, seated beside her, tapped a pen thoughtfully against the table. Maybe we can't compete on price, but we can compete on something else, our values. Let's remind our clients why they chose us in the first place. Elena looked at her, intrigued. What are you thinking? Victoria smiled. Campaign. We tell our story, not just ours, but the stories of our employees and the communities we've helped. People don't just want a service, they want to know they're supporting something meaningful. The room buzzed with agreement, and Elena felt a surge of hope. Victoria's idea was bold, but it felt true to who they were. The campaign launched a month later. It featured videos and articles highlighting Fresh Start employees and the impact the company had on their lives. One video followed Jorge, the supervisor Elena had met in Chicago, as he talked about how the company had given him a sense of purpose and pride. Another featured Anna, the single mother who had been able to return to school thanks to Fresh Start's flexible scheduling. But the centerpiece of the campaign was a video featuring Elena and Victoria themselves. Filmed in Victoria's mansion, the place where their journey had begun. The video showed the two women sitting side by side, sharing their story. "I used to think success was about wealth and power," Victoria said in the video. "But Elena showed me that real success is about people. It's about lifting each other up and creating something that matters." Elena nodded, her voice steady as she added, "Fresh Start isn't just a company, it's a community. We're here to prove that you can run a business with integrity and still succeed. And we're just getting started." The campaign struck a chord. Clients who had been considering leaving Fresh Start decided to stay, moved by the company's commitment to its values. New clients reached out, eager to support a business that stood for something greater than profits. As the crisis passed, Elena and Victoria reflected on how far they had come. Their partnership had been tested, but it had only grown stronger. Yet, amidst the victories, there were personal challenges that loomed in the background. For Elena, the challenge was balancing her role as a business leader with her responsibilities as a mother. Rosa was growing up quickly, and while she was proud of her mama, she sometimes felt the sting of her absence. One evening, as Elena tucked Rosa into bed, the little girl looked up at her with wide eyes. "Mama, do you always have to work so much?" Elena's heart ached at the question. "I'm doing this for us, mi amor," she said gently, "so we can have a better life." Rosa nodded but didn't look convinced. "I miss you sometimes." Elena kissed her forehead, tears pricking her eyes. "I miss you too. And I promise I'll try to be home more." For Victoria, the challenge was reconciling her new purpose with her old world. Many of her former friends had distanced themselves, unable or unwilling to understand her transformation. She didn't miss their superficial conversations or the constant pressure to maintain appearances, but she sometimes felt the sting of isolation. One afternoon, while reviewing paperwork in her study, Victoria received an unexpected call. It was Lydia, the friend who had reached out after reading the magazine feature. They had stayed in touch sporadically, but this call was different. "I've been thinking about what you said," Lydia began, her voice hesitant. "About looking beyond myself. I want to do something that matters, but I don't know where to start." Victoria felt a flicker of hope. "Start by listening," she said. "Look around you. There's always someone who needs help, someone whose story deserves to be heard." Lydia was quiet for a moment. "Would you help me? I don't want to get it wrong." Victoria smiled. "Of course. Let's meet next week and talk." It was a small step, but it reminded Victoria that change was possible, even for those who seemed entrenched in their ways. As Fresh Start continued to expand, Elena and Victoria began exploring ways to give back on a larger scale. They established a foundation to support community projects, from building affordable housing to funding education initiatives. The foundation quickly became a cornerstone of their work, amplifying the impact of their efforts. At the first board meeting for the foundation, Victoria addressed the team with a sense of purpose she had never felt before. "This isn't just about us," she said. "It's about creating a legacy that lasts. A legacy of compassion, fairness, and hope." Elena, seated beside her, added, "We've seen what's possible when people come together to support each other. Now it's our turn to pay it forward." Years passed, and Fresh Start became a beacon of hope for countless people. Elena and Victoria's friendship deepened with each challenge they faced, their bond forged in mutual respect and shared purpose. Rosa grew into a bright, confident young woman, inspired by her mother's resilience and determination. On the company's 10th anniversary, a celebration was held at a community center that Fresh Start had helped renovate. Employees, clients, and supporters gathered to honor the journey that had brought them all together. Elena stood on stage, looking out at the crowd. Her voice was steady as she began to speak. 10 years ago, I couldn't have imagined standing here. Back then, I was just trying to survive, working to give my daughter a better life. But someone believed in me, and that belief changed everything." She turned to Victoria, her eyes shining. "Victoria, you gave me a chance when no one else would. You didn't just help me build a business, you helped me find my voice. And for that, I'll always be grateful." Victoria stepped forward, her own voice filled with emotion. "Elena, you taught me what it means to care. To see people not for where they are, but for who they are. You changed my life in ways I never thought possible." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the room. It was a moment of triumph, a testament to the power of connection and the impact of choosing to see the humanity in others. As the celebration continued, Elena and Victoria stood side by side, watching the people whose lives they had touched. It wasn't just about the business or the awards, it was about the legacy they had built together. And as they looked to the future, they knew their work was far from over. There were more lives to change, more barriers to break, and more hope to spread. Together, they had proven that even the most unlikely partnerships could create something extraordinary. And they were just getting started.